No funny intro, let's get straight into it. West Coast, F. A putrid season from start to finish, albeit not entirely unexpected. Tipped to finish an average of 16th by our predictions gang, they somehow fell below both their expectations and Pythagorean expectations to a large degree. They ranked last in overall player contributions thanks to a useless midfield and fell to an ELO score that neighbours with 2013 GWS and 1996 Fitzroy. And honestly, it looks like they're going to get the 3 losses they need to start the next season to fall below both of those icons of terribleness to become the worst side this league has ever seen by ELO since the Weimar Republic became a thing. If you don't know what that is, open a history book, come on. Richmond, D-. A lot of people thought this side wouldn't win a game. Many more thought this side was perhaps the worst they'd seen in a decade, if not the worst Richmond side they'd seen of all time, which takes some doing, honestly. This side ended up coming half a win away from clearing the bottom 2 of just this season, getting 5 wins, including a brilliant opener against an admittedly awful Blues. Their forwards were terrible, yes, as was their midfield, but the backline helped them stand up to the attacks of admittedly very poor teams to get to 5 wins, twice their expected tally. A lot of that's Nick Vlostone. Honestly, how he didn't make the All-Australian over battle, I have no idea, but that's another video. North, E. You guys didn't give North a lot of rope, averaging a 15th place prediction, and yet they still managed to hang themselves with it. A stirring draw with Brisbane and a Cooper Trembeth-led resistance at the end of the season is far outweighed by, well, the rest of the season, basically. ELO's pretty easy to gain when your tally starts with an 8, but the Roos did improve, albeit less than Geelong did, which is really damning because the Cats had to do so much more to earn that improvement. Thanks to Trembeth and Jerry, the Roos had 2 positional subsets in which they were in the top 10 in vault contributions, but they got nothing from every other source. Their overall rating suggesting they absolutely deserved to be down this far, with their backline being a travesty. Hopefully they get someone new in this trades period, yeah, huh? Still opting with Toby Pink as your best defender. Oh boy, they're improving, but way too slowly, and next year's the big one. They need to show everyone that they can stop being such a basket case. Essendon, E. You all got this one pretty on the nose on average, and good on you for not falling for their 2024 bizarre heroics. Injuries blasted this season, but it was in tatters before that by just looking at the list. Only their key forwards, thank you to 8-seater Peter, ranked anything above completely rubbish, with some stupidly bizarre wins keeping them 3 expected wins above a tally that should have been half what it ended up being. This is not a good team, and it will continue not to be so for quite some time. Melbourne, F. Melbourne came into the season with an ELO of 1252, more than Adelaide, the Gold Coast and Hawthorn. They exited with 1105, less than Carlton and St Kilda, and the single biggest drop in the league this season. Petrarca's out the door, May's probably about to join him, Oliver's a spent force, Kelly's too injured to help, and Fritsch has regressed badly, so much so that their key forward stocks were ranked lower than the Swans this year. The rest were okay, guiding Melbourne to 8th in T-Vault standings, but for the D's to finish 13th is a disgrace. Actually 14th, I got that wrong. Jesus Christ, wow. They also under-delivered compared to what they actually put on the board, almost falling 2.5 wins below what their percentage would suggest. Just an awful season by every expectation and standard, and hopefully Stephen King can turn this around before it turns into a Stephen King horror story. Port Adelaide, E. The next biggest fall-off after Melbourne, ELO-wise, was the power. It's not really surprising considering how their season went. With Hinkley's foot out the door, Port Adelaide fell apart before the season even really began. Yes, injuries to Luco and Marshall hurt them, leaving the replacements up front to stumble to pretty much last in key forward T-Vorp. Jordan Sweet also completely fell off, with Port's rucks the least effective league-wide, and Butter's absence and Rosie's shift to half-back left a huge void in midfield, not least with JHF regressing badly and, well, he and Butters missing more than a few games. Their defence did reasonably well, but reasonably well can't compensate for all of what I just mentioned. Seriously, if not for their backline holding up at critical moments, they regress to their expected 5.35 wins. Port were the league leaders in overperformance and yet were the third most disappointing team in our predictions championship. I'll be a bit lenient because of the injuries, just giving them an E instead of an outright F because they were just tanked up forward, but what a damp squib for Ken to go out on. Nice legacy. St Kilda, C+. I didn't think this side was good enough to make finals, and it showed. However, pretty much solely thanks to Naz, they improved 2.23 spots from where we thought they'd finish. Despite that, and despite entering 2025 with a below-average ELO, they dropped some ranking points and also overperformed by exactly one win, which I think was this one. Marshall put his truncated pre-season and protracted contract talks behind him to carry the midfield, whilst their defence managed the very rare combination of producing 2 top 40 players and also placing third last in that general category. Their key forwards, despite missing Max King for the whole season, were their strength outside of their rucks, placing 6th. Such a weird season. I'm just going to give it a C+ and move on, especially considering that they managed to keep Rowan Marshall and they managed to land another Jack, even if they lose one of their best ones. Carlton, D. This seems a bit lenient considering that a lot of people had them for top 4 and even some for the big dance, and they ended up 11th. However, I was able to look at their reasonably dog shit list and accurately assess that it would be painfully mediocre. The weird thing is, they were top 6 for weighted vault contributions for midfielders and key backs and 9th in key forwards, but overall for T-Vault, as well as by Pythagorean calculations and ELO rankings, they are exactly where they deserve to be. Actually, they lost Silvani, who was their best player, and De Koning, who was a serviceable above average ruck. So downgrade that D to a D-. I'm feeling charitable, you're not getting an E. Just. You know who does get an E? Sydney. They were disappointing. So disappointing that in our predictions challenge they were the most overranked team of the year, falling 4.7 positions below where our average tipster had them finishing. The worst part is they finished pretty much exactly where they deserved. 10th in Pythagorean wins, but overperforming by nearly 1.5 wins. The ELO took not as much of a hit as you'd think, but the real damage is done by T-Vault. With Mills, Goulden and Papley missing half the season, they fell to 13th as a team. Despite missing those guys, their midfield was their best component, Rowbottom and McInerney picking up the slack to get them to not even the top 8. Their tall stocks were as useless as last year, staying in the bottom 6 at both ends, but it was their general backs and forwards that were the proverbial rocks in a drowning man's pockets. Wicks, Patton, Cunningham and Rampy all had negative T-Vaults down back, with Wicks being the least valuable player over 16 games, but Blakey and Mills saved the defensive rating, even if Blakey's actual pure defensive rating is total dogshit. Papley was the only general Swan forward so much as one standard deviation above 0, most of the rest being so average. It's a problem area that really I didn't see coming, and they need to fix next season. Well, they might. Hello, Charlie Curnow. Western Bulldogs, D-. For the second time in 3 years, the top scoring side finishes 9th on the ladder, but this iteration is so incredibly disappointing. True, if the upsides weren't painted on in the Collingwood game at the start of the year, they'd have finished in the 8 over the Hawks, but the same is true if they didn't shit the bed against the Dockers at the end. They were the only side to have a player finish above 10 T-Vault. Indeed, they had 2. Despite both players missing at least 5 games, which hurts their weighted T-Vault, which I use for team calculations, the positions they played in were the Bulldogs' best, unsurprisingly. That midfield was outrageous, with 4 of the top 10 players overall living in the Dogs' engine room if you count the ruckman, while the tall forward stocks were elite, even without JHF for the whole year and Norton for the start. So, where was it lost? Well, the same place it was last year, the backline. They were 16th in general defence, 17th in key backs, and had a similar defensive efficiency to Richmond and Port Adelaide, wasting a league-leading attacking efficiency. You want proof they wasted this season? They underperformed their Pythagorean expected total by 5.58 wins. That's top 10 all time. That's 125 years of history and top 5 since 1908. Weirdly, they're 9th in league ELO, which is kind of hilarious, and finished almost exactly where they were predicted, which would suggest that they weren't the biggest letdown in the league, but the way they did it was just so gutting. Didn't I tell you? Didn't I tell you? A harder draw meant things were going to be trickier in the clinches, and indeed the Hawks finished 2 wins under expectation as a result, but they were the only side to finish top 8 in T-Vault weighted contributions across every single positional subset. Very, very annoying. They were so solid across the board and gained the 3rd most ELO points this year as a mark of their consistent rise. Their 5th place overall T-Vault finish was done even without Will Day's influence. His 7.3 T-Vault, which was very good, counted for only a quarter in the weighted rankings that I use for teams. But the Hawks did well regardless, and that's thanks to 25 players finishing with a positive T-Vault, the most of any side and a frankly insane amount. They did super well, and even despite not landing Zach Merritt, their player retention has been absolutely amazing. Watch for them next year. Gold Coast. Damn it. First final series, finishing over 4 places above expected even whilst underperforming to the tune of nearly 3 wins, gaining the 2nd most ELO, winning the Brownlow medal and getting Petrarca into the bargain for next year. Huge year for the relevance of the Suns, but there's still issues they need to fix. They were 9th overall in T-Vault, but good midfield and solid defence was let down by a forward line that revolved around a Ben King who was only able to score goals and not contribute in any other way, and a Bailey Humphrey who was absolutely fantastic but didn't get the help he needed. It's technically the least valuable forward setup league-wide thanks to 6 different forwards registering T-Vaults of under -3. Did they deserve to make a semi-final? Yeah, jury's out on that one, but the fact they made it at all, that's an A, no doubt. I hate that. Freemantle, B. A decent, if slightly inconsistent season from Freemantle, who overperformed their way into the finals by snatching late, maturing wins over the Pies and Dogs. That being said, you lot pegged them exactly right, guessing on average 0.02 spots away from their final 6th place finish, which is mirrored in their ELO rating. My T-Vault agrees with Pythagoras though, also having the Dockers just outside the 8 thanks to merely average performances from most positions. Murphy Reed, Shea Bolton and Sam Switkowski lifted them to an uncharacteristically high finish in general forwards, and they've set themselves up nicely for the future. Can't really say anything too bad or too overwhelmingly great about their season. General sort of B vibes really, and good on them. GWS, B-. Pretty average, which is disappointing for what was the most exciting side of 2024, but you lot saw that coming. Despite the AFL journos and me putting the Giants in the grand final, our predictions entrance averaged 5.37th place. That's so awkward, which is almost bang on. By all metrics, they finished up pretty much exactly where they belonged, but weirdly it was their midfield that let them down. Their backs were typically great, even if Jack Buckley missed the end of the season, which did hurt them. Their forwards were typically damaging and team-oriented, which my algorithm absolutely loves, but outside of Callaghan and Green, the mids did nothing. Kelly had a similar season to Ryan Angwin. Ward ended his career, and Ware stunk it up so much that he's been sent to the Port Adelaide prison for wasted potential. Their best football was great, but they failed to be consistent about it. If they can land a big fish in the guts, watch for them in 2026. And I wrote that, as you can clearly see, before they got Clayton fucking Oliver. So watch that space. They're going to be good with a refreshed Oliver. Hell yeah. Collingwood, B. The old fellas surpassed my expectations, and good on them. 5th for Pythagorean wins, 3rd in ELOs, 7th in T-Vault, so a 4th place finish is what they deserved. However, they did blow a 10-point lead on the top of the table and lost 2 finals, which really showed how close the cliff is for these guys. Tim Membry was an inspired addition, and good thing they had him, because even with him, their key forward stocks were by far their weakest position. Their 3 keys all had positive T-Vaults, but all were under 1, which is kind of insane. It's like holding your breath underwater. Overall, a decent season, but the end is nigh, because you can't really expect Jamie Elliott to kick another 60 goals next year. That's just not how things work. And you don't have Brody Myercheck anymore, so... Brisbane, A+. easy grade considering they won the flag, but they almost didn't, really. They were 8th in expected wins, which was a shock, but then again their most convincing win wasn't until the last day of September, and their best quarter wasn't until literally the last one. But according to TVORP, they absolutely deserved their crown. 2nd overall, led by the best backline in the league, top in key backs and 2nd in general. Jack Payne was one of many key backs who did well but got injured early, while Zorko led besides TVORP. Andrews, Wilmot and Fletcher all featured in their top 10, and literally only one backman got a negative score. Brandon Starcevich. Congratulations, Brandon. Your prize, a one-way ticket to the 18th placed West Coast. He'll fit right in there. Their mids were also 2nd best behind the Dogs, but the forward line was actually pretty awful. General forwards did okay, thank you Zach Bailey, but outside of Logan Morris, their keys opened nothing up goal side. Wait, what's that? They've already realised that and have brought in Oscar Allen and Sam Draper? Cool. See, Sydney, that's how you do it. If I was your list manager, you wouldn't have let Adelaide treat you like that kid in Tiananmen Square once the cameras turned off. Well, there goes the Chinese audience. Guess I'm not doing Zhangwan Stadium anytime soon. Geelong. A. They led the league in expected wins, the only side above 20 this year, and were 1st overall in TVORP. When people tell you the Cats were the best side all year, they were right. And indeed they were until the last 35 minutes of the season. Only their rucks and general defence failed to secure a top 4 appearance positionally via VORP, and that's with many of their role players being undervalued by the algorithm. Apologies to O'Sheen Mullen and by extension Rory Kilpatrick. So I guess Rowan Marshall would go a long way to solving that problem. Pity you couldn't get the deal done. Anyway, they'll grab another 15 wins next year, just because that's what they always do. Just make sure it's not you guys shitting the bed at the end of the year this time, eh? Adelaide. A. Holy shit. 8 places above the average expectation at the start of the year. The biggest ELO gain of the season. A completely unexpected minor premiership which Pythagoras proves they earned. 4th in overall TVORP, which shows the whole thing wasn't a fluke. Top 7 in all positions bar key backs, which proved to be our weakness at the end of the season, unfortunately, as well as one very particular forward who let all the good vibes rush out of the club like air coming out of a stabbed balloon. You know what you did, Isaac. There was a very serious temptation to give the season an F, just because I've never been more disappointed with how a season ended. Like, here's Adelaide in round 21, finally breaking the Collingwood curse and moving to top spot, assured of playing their first finals in 8 years, only for that idiot to do something so stupid and make everyone hate us, cause a nasty section of the fan base to out themselves, and make the club culture so negative we barely limped across the line against West Coast and North Melbourne, 2 of the worst sides to ever exist, before realising we'd already spooged our load, forced to shuffle out the finals door, trousers around our ankles and offering muttered apologies. But the forward line is thriving, and that's before we get Archie in the pre-season draft. Love a bargain. Riley O'Brien was somehow the 5th best ruck battalion by himself, despite worse kicking than literal children, and Josh Worrell almost proved me to be a very specific clairvoyant, and in fact actually should have done, and I blame Kane Corns for his snub, specifically Kane Corns, even if it wasn't his fault. I like blaming him. The big gap is the midfield, specifically the canyon between Dawson and the rest. 11th in TVORP for a minor premiership midfield is outrageous, but still, the season was more than good enough for an A. So, those are all the grades. Which ones do you agree with? Do you think I've underrated your team or even overrated? Let me know in the comments below and I'll see you. I don't know why I keep doing this move. It's terrible and it throws the new camera off focus. But anyway, see you guys soon.